Good morning, all. We continue in the jury trial of State of West Virginia versus Natalie Cochran. This is case number 23-F-343K. All parties are present, including the defendant. Are there matters that we need to take up at this time out of the presence of the jury?
Nothing for the state, Your Honor. Thank you.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Very well. Bailiff, bring in the jury. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and welcome back. I'm glad to see your smiling faces, at least some smiling faces. I hope you rested well and you are ready to continue. Today is Friday, and so that's a happy thing. We are still on the state's case in chief, and we will get started right away. Mr. Truman, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Jason Bowen. Could I have 8?
If you'll raise your right hand, please, sir. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated right there. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. What's your name, please?
Jason Bowen.
And Mr. Bowen, tell us what you do for a living.
I'm a general contractor. Do all aspects of construction.
And where are you currently working?
I have a company called Dreamcatchers Construction.
And do you operate locally here in Raleigh County?
No, I travel.
And currently, what projects are you working on, or just generally, where are you working?
I'm up north working on a church currently.
Okay. Let me take you back to 2019. Where were you then? Where were you working then?
In 2019, we was working for Mr. and Mrs. Cochran, doing various projects.
Was that your same company?
Mm-hmm.
And did you work full-time for the Cochrans, or did you take other work as well?
No, we worked fully for Mr. and Mrs. Cochran.
Okay. Your Honor, due to poor planning, I forgot to turn on the equipment, if that's okay.
All right, we'll get you some assistance.
Okay. Did you work solely by yourself with the Cochrans, or did you have other people working with you?
No, it was me and my business partner, Jonathan Miller.
And Mr. Miller died as a result of a vehicle accident, is that correct?
He did.
Do you know approximately when Mr. Miller died?
It was March 30th of 2020.
Thanks. Did you turn the overhead on? Were you two partners in a company, or did you just work together?
Well, it was he had his company and I had my company, and we just kind of joined forces to work together.
Okay, but both of you were working essentially full-time for the Cochrans?
Yes.
On February 6th of 2019, do you recall receiving a text from the defendant at about 12:20 or so?
I do.
Where were you when you received the text?
We had just left Lowe's. We had gotten some paint and supplies. We was working on a airplane hangar.
When you say we,
Me and Jonathan.
you and Jonathan Miller? Thank you. Yeah, that doesn't show up very well, does it? Let me just hand this to you.
Okay.
Hand you what's been marked as States 1 and ask you to take a look at the first text.
I recall this.
You do. And you received that while you were still at Lowe's with Mr. Miller?
We was actually in the truck leaving Lowe's.
What time did that text come in?
A little bit before 12.
Actually, if it shows right there, it's 12:21. Unfortunately, it's uniform time, so you have to adjust
Yes.
by 5 hours.
Yes.
Okay. And when you got that text, what did it ask you to do?
She was asking to come to the house that Mike had gotten sick and was laying in the kitchen floor.
And she being the defendant?
Natalie, yes.
Okay. What did you do in response to that text?
We told her we was on our way and started to head straight there.
Do you know, and did you do that?
We did.
What time did you get to the Cochran house?
12:30, 12:35, maybe 12:40.
And when you got there, had she instructed you what to do when you got there?
She did. She told us they was in the kitchen. Just come on in.
Did you do that?
We did. We knocked, opened the door, and said hello. And she answered and said, "We're in here."
Had you been in the Cochran house before?
Many times.
So you knew where the kitchen was?
Yes,
Did you go into the kitchen?
we did.
And when you got in the kitchen, what did you see?
Mike was laying on the floor in a curled up position.
Now, you didn't get a picture of Michael, but the defendant sent it to a number of people. Is that what you saw when you got to the kitchen?
It was.
What did she tell you happened to him?
She said he had gotten sick at the sink and just kind of lowered himself down into the floor using a cabinet. And that's where he kind of ended up.
Had he hit his head or anything?
Not that I know of.
Okay. What was it? Just the three of you plus Michael at the time? You, the defendant, and Mr. Miller in the house?
Yes.
And what did you do?
She asked us to move him to the couch, so me and Jonathan got him kind of laid back where we could carry him safely, and then we carried him to the couch.
Did you talk to Mr. Cochran?
We was trying to talk to him several times, saying his name, Mike. Can you hear us? There was several times we tried to talk to him, yes.
Did you get a response from Mr. Cochran?
No.
From your assessment of what was going on, did you think just carrying him to the couch was sufficient?
Once we got him to the couch, we felt like he needed checked.
And by that, what do you mean?
He was not responsive. Jonathan actually did a sternum rub on him once we got to the couch, and he kind of responded. He groaned, but he did not. A sternum rub, you're going to come up out of that, and if you're lucid.
Did you ever hear Mr. Cochran on that day February the 6th, 2019, did he converse at all with anybody in your presence?
No,
Did he arouse at all and seem awake?
no.
How long were you at the Cochran house after you moved, Michael?
Maybe 20 minutes.
Did anybody else appear during that time?
Trooper Hamilton had came probably 5 minutes after we got there. He came through the front door.
Had you already moved Mr. Cochran to the couch from the kitchen by that time?
We had.
If I could have that one back, please. Mr. Bowen, was that the end of your communication with the defendant that day?
No, no, we had texted a few times back and forth trying to find out how he was.
And what were the reports in response to your questions?
That he was sleeping it off, or that no change.
And he never woke up while you were there?
No.
State moves states 8 into evidence, please. You?
What is it? Number
States 8.
Are you moving for its admission?
We are.
Any objection, Mr. Victor?
No, Your Honor.
States exhibit number 8 will be admitted into evidence.
Wait a minute. Forgot about this.
Does that conclude the questioning of this witness on behalf of the state?
I did have one more. Did the defendant tell you her understanding of what Michael Cochran's plans were that day?
No, we was not in any kind of plans for that day.
Not after he was sick. I mean, what was his intention before he collapsed?
They had mentioned that they was going to Virginia.
Do you recall being interviewed by Trooper Bledsoe?
I do.
Do you remember telling him that you thought that she said Mike was going to hang out with you and Jonathan at the hangar?
I do.
Okay. So, was he going to hang out at the hangar with you or go to Virginia?
I don't know.
Okay. That's all the questions the state has. Thank you.
All right, cross-examination, Mr. Victor.
Mr. Bowen, is it true that on February the 6th, early in the morning, you received the message from Michael that he wasn't feeling good and he would not be working on a hangar with you?
I do not recall.
You don't recall?
I don't recall. I can't remember.
You and Mr. Miller were actually working on a hangar, right?
We was.
And as you sit here today, you do not remember that message from Mr. Cochran,
I do not.
okay?
If you have a printout of the messages or something, I might be able to remember the conversation. But as we stand here, no,
You don't recall.
I do not.
You spent some time with Mr. Cochran while working on various projects.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be a yes?
You would? Yes.
Okay. And do you remember going with Mr. Cochran to Lowe's to purchase some products or something for one of his construction?
Any specific time that he would go with us several times to Lowe's.
Well, let's say about a week prior to February the 6th. Well, let me strike that.
Like I said, there's many times that we've been there.
All right. Do you remember the time when you were in Lowe's and Mr. Cochran was not sure who drove the vehicle to Lowe's?
No, that is not that time.
Okay, what time was that?
You're speaking of a time when we was working on the airplane hangar. We had breakfast that morning.
Okay, what months could that be?
That would have been February.
In February. He was so confused that he didn't even remember driving his own car.
He remembered driving his truck. He just didn't remember where he parked.
I see. He wasn't confused about who drove the truck? No? Okay. He told you on several occasions that he felt sick. How was he sick? What did he tell you?
It was after we got finished working on a house that he had gotten into some black mold. He would just complain about dizziness and stuff.
Did he complain about dizziness and lightheadedness in January of 2019?
I don't recall.
Did he complain about feeling sick in February, at the beginning of February of 2019?
I don't recall February. I would say more in December.
More in December. Well, he told you he had a seizure in, I would imagine, December or January, December of 2018 or January 2019, didn't he?
I don't recall him
You don't
telling me
recall.
about a seizure. No.
Okay? And he told you at the beginning of February, didn't he, that he felt another one coming? Didn't he?
No.
Now you're denying that? Okay. What did he complain of, sir, when he was telling you that he didn't feel good?
He would complain about just not feeling right, just feeling dizzy.
Not feeling right, how?
Felt like he said he felt like he'd been poisoned.
He felt like he was poisoned. All right. Did you witness Mr. Cochran's illness in November of 2018?
I was with him in the hospital.
Okay. He lost consciousness, right?
He never lost consciousness. I think they sedated him while he was in the hospital.
He felt lightheaded. Right? He had a seizure, perhaps?
I don't know.
Okay. You don't really know the exact problems that Mr. Cochran had that landed him in a hospital in November of 2018, do you?
No.
Okay. And he complained to you about the same symptoms in December and January, or December 2018 and January 2019, that he had when he went to the hospital in October or November of 2018, didn't he?
I wouldn't say it was the same symptoms, no.
No? Yeah. You went to the Cochran's home on numerous occasions, you testified.
I did.
The bedroom in the Cochran's home was upstairs, correct?
All the bedrooms was.
Okay. And the kitchen was downstairs. And it was not directly, well, and the steps leading to, well, from upstairs to downstairs were not exactly leading straight to the kitchen. The kitchen was still some rooms away from the stairs, right?
Correct.
So if somebody well, let me strike that. Michael was a pretty big guy, wasn't he? How much did he weigh, to your estimation?
Probably 200 pounds.
200 pounds. And so if he was injected with some poison in bed upstairs, a singular person such as Natalie Cochran would have to drag him downstairs, all the way to the stairs, then downstairs, and then through the whole house into the kitchen, right? Would you consider that possible?
Assuming that's what happened.
Assuming that's what happened. There was nobody else in the house when you arrived, correct?
Correct.
With Mr. Miller, right?
Just me and Mr. Miller, yes.
Right. And so the only person who would have injected him in the bed and upstairs and who would drag him downstairs would have been Natalie Cochran, right?
Brian, this is pretty speculative.
Yeah, I think it is. Is that an objection,
Okay.
Mr. Truman?
It is, I'm
All right.
sorry.
I think I'll sustain the objection. And Mr. Bowen, if you could say yes or no, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
I'm having a little difficulty understanding your responses.
I apologize, Your Honor.
No problem.
Mr.
Go
Bowen,
ahead.
when you were, I'm sorry, Your Honor. Mr. Bowen, when you were in the Cochran's house on February the 6th,
Yes.
did you observe my client, Natalie Cochran, checking Mr. Cochran's blood sugar?
I did.
She did that, didn't she? All right. You knew Mr. Cochran as a, well, let's say, bodybuilder, an athlete, right?
He was definitely an athlete, yes.
Yes. He really cared about his
His
physique,
physique.
his health, his body.
Yes.
But he cared about his health in terms of his outward appearance, right?
He liked his inner, he liked feeling healthy.
He was what? I'm
He
sorry.
liked feeling healthy.
Feeling healthy. And would you say that he was very happy when he was physically fit?
I would.
All right. So in pursuit of that fitness, sir, would you agree with me that he was taking a lot of pills that were going to increase his appearance? Right?
I don't know about that. I know he took supplements. There's many kinds of supplements.
All kinds of supplements, right?
Yes.
To increase his vitality, to increase his physicality. Right.
Yes.
Well, how many of the, well, do you know what those supplements were?
I do not.
Well, how many of them did he take?
I don't know.
Well, you were in their home frequently. Did you witness Mr. Cochran taking as many as 30 and 35 pills at a time?
I did not.
You did not? What did you witness?
I never witnessed him taking any supplements.
Okay. So how do you know that he was taking supplements? He told you?
He told me.
All right. Did you also know that he was injecting medicine into his body?
I did not.
Okay. Did he ever tell you that?
No.
Right. What did Michael Cochran do for a living?
He ran data cable, AV cable. It was his profession.
Okay. Well, did he have two businesses that he ran? TSM, or TSG, whatever.
Yes, TSM. He ran with Natalie.
Did he ever talk to you about the government contracts?
He
What
did.
Say? What did he say he did for those government contracts?
He said he would research the government contracts online and send them to Natalie, and she would work on it and put a bid in.
He would research them, right?
He would find the contract, the specific listings for what they was doing.
Okay. Did you know that he suffered from brain swelling?
I was told yes.
Who told you that?
Natalie.
Did you, were you curious after he came out of the hospital in November of 2019 what they told him about his health?
Yeah, I was curious. We was told that it was exposure to black mold.
It was just the exposure to black mold. Nobody mentioned anything about seizures. Nobody mentioned anything about enlarged heart. Nobody mentioned anything about brain swelling.
No.
Nobody. Okay. And who would that be? The doctors?
Natalie's who we got all of our information from.
Natalie. And did you inquire of Mr. Cochran himself? Buddy, what's wrong with you? What was wrong with you? What did the doctors say? Did you ever inquire?
We would ask him how he's feeling today or something like that, but he never told us any kind of diagnosis or anything like that. We never really talked about it. Once we was in the hospitals, when we got the information, we would just see how he's feeling day to day.
Well, he went to the hospital on October 31st and came out of the hospital, right?
Yes.
And he knew you. You guys worked together. You were almost buddies, right?
We was buddies, yes.
We was buddies. All right. Didn't you ask him? Well, hey, Bud, what did they say was wrong with you?
No.
No. But then he was in the hospital 2 days later with all these horrible symptoms and stayed in the hospital this time for 5 days. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. For 5 days.
Correct.
And you were there with him.
I was.
And then he comes out of the hospital and you do not bother to ask him, buddy, what did the doctor say? What was it?
It was always black mold exposure.
If I may have a second.
Certainly.
That's all I have of this witness, Your Honor. Thank you.
Very well. Redirect Mr. Truman.
State has one redirect question. In response to defense counsel's question, you said that the defendant took the vital signs of Mr. Cochran?
That's correct.
That's mischaracterized my question.
I think it is, perhaps, but you could ask the question straight out, Mr. Truman.
Okay. While you were there, did the defendant take vital signs of Mr. Cochran?
She did.
Now, did you participate in any of that?
I did not.
Did you actually see the raw data?
I did not.
Did she tell you what the results of her taking those vital signs were?
She would say what it was, but I don't remember those numbers.
That's all the questions the state has, Your Honor. Thank you.
Any further questions, Mr. Victor?
Were you there when the physician assistant arrived?
No, I was told to leave while she was on her way.
Okay. So you don't know whether any other person took any vital signs or temperature, vital signs, sugar level of Mr. Cochran.
No, Natalie's the only one I've seen.
All right. That's all. Thank you.
Anything, Mr. Truman?
We know that the defendant had a working phone because she was able to text you, and you text back, correct?
Correct.
In your presence, did she ever call 911?
No.
Two objectives outside of the scope of my
Overruled. Go ahead.
Did she?
No.
Were you and Jonathan Miller capable of loading Mr. Cochran into a car and taking him to the hospital?
Very much so, yes.
Did she ever suggest you do that?
No, we actually asked her if she wanted us to.
What was her response?
No.
That's all the state has.
Well, then, in that regard, did you know, from talking to Michael, or anybody else for that matter, that Mr. Cochran refused to go to the hospital? and for that matter, that he would say that he will never again go to the hospital after his October and November 2018 experience.
He said he would never go back to Raleigh General Hospital.
Okay. He didn't like the hospitals, did he?
Who does?
Who does? So just because he was there at home doesn't necessarily mean that he wanted to be taken to the hospital immediately, does it? Especially that he didn't like going back to the hospital. Fair enough?
I don't know. I wasn't able to ask him.
Right. Okay. That's all.
Anything further?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor. Thank you.
Any reason to hold this witness over?
Not from the state's perspective, no, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bowen. You may step down. You are excused, sir. Call your next witness, Mr. Truman.
State calls J.C. Stevens.
Your Honor, may we take just a moment before Mr. Truman questions Mr. Stevens? I need to confer with my colleague for just a moment.
Okay. Are you asking for a break, or can you do it while we're all here?
Just a couple minutes.
Okay.
That's all, Your Honor.
All right. If you'll raise your right hand, please, sir. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may have a seat. All right, Mr. Truman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tell us your name, please.
My name is Joseph Stevens, and my last name is spelled Stepphens.
And are you employed?
Yes, I currently work at the FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia, FBI being the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
And do you have a job title?
I do. I'm a chemist, forensic examiner at the lab there in the chemistry unit.
And what's your primary duties as a chemist for the FBI?
My primary duties are to receive evidence from contributors. Those contributors can be state, local, or federal partners. We receive that evidence through our evidence management unit, and that's passed up to the individual units, such as myself.
Your Honor, I hate to interrupt, but could Mr. Stevens slow down just a little bit? I'm having a little trouble following his testimony.
All right. Perhaps you can scoot up a little bit towards the microphone and slow down just a little bit, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Truman.
Go ahead, Mr. Stevens.
So we receive evidence from our evidence management unit. It comes up to our chemistry unit where it's assigned to an examiner, such as myself. I then intake that evidence, check it in, determine what kind of evidence I have, what kind of analyses I need to do. And then I process that evidence and I issue a report. This will be a forensic report or a laboratory report. And then as needed, I testify to those observations and findings that I made.
How long have you worked for the FBI?
I started working at the FBI in April of 2016, so I've been there for a little more than 8 years.
And you started as a forensic chemist, and that's what you do now?
That is correct.
And, what kind of experience did you have before you went to work for the FBI as a forensic chemist?
Before the FBI, I worked at the United States Secret Service in Washington, D.C. They have a forensic document laboratory. There I performed instrumental analysis on inks, papers, and toners, and I did that for about 10 years. I started there in December of 2005 through April of 2016.
Would you please share with us your educational background?
I earned a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from Roanoke College in Virginia. After that, I attended Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas. I did not earn a degree from that, but I transferred to the George Washington University, where I earned a Master of Science in Forensic Science in 2007.
Did you receive any specialized training in forensic chemistry?
Yes. So as part of my training at the United States Secret Service, I completed a 2-year training program there. And upon my arrival at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, I completed another 2-year training program there as well.
In this particular case, do you have any specialized training that would qualify you to determine an analysis that would result in a finding of insulin?
Yes. So as part of our 2-year training program at the FBI, I conducted practicals, which I work with insulin, putting it on my instrumentation and analyzing it. And then I'm eventually given what's known as a competency test to ensure that I know how to perform the analysis. And I successfully completed that competency test. And then there's also other components of that training, such as oral boards, where a panel of my peers evaluate my knowledge on topics.
Your Honor, at this point, the state, subject to defense inquiry, moves that the witness be treated under 702 as an expert.
Do you wish to engage in voir dire, Mr. Selden?
No, Your Honor.
Is there any objection to the state's request?
No, Your Honor.
This witness will be regarded as an expert in his described field.
Yeah, this marked as states 9 and 10, please.
9 and 10, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Let's start with 9. Just glue it on there. Thanks. That is a box and a lid. Approach the witness, sir.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Stevens, I hand you what's been marked at this point as for identification as states 9, and feel free to open the envelope and review it. You familiar with that?
Yes, I am.
Before we get to that point, how is it that States 9 came into your possession?
This case came in through our Pittsburgh field office, which is the field office responsible for this area. So it came in as a case submission through Pittsburgh.
And what were you asked to examine, not only this, but the rest of the documents, the items we're going to review with you? What were you asked to examine them for?
I was submitted 4 items. One of them was a box, and 3 of them were vials containing unknown substances or unknown liquids. I was asked to analyze the unknown liquids within those vials.
And there's another item in that package, correct?
Yes, there is.
You got 10. Stick with 10. I'm gonna have to do it on- I'll just put it on. You've got a package in here. I'll bring it back to you. If you could put, probably the easiest way to do it. How do you want to handle the bottle? You can put it right on everything. Okay. Yeah, that's anywhere. Bottom's fine. That's good. And what's been marked for identification is States 10. You identify that, sir?
The item states exhibit number 10 is a vial of methylprednisolone acetate that I received in the lab.
Let's go ahead and get all the exhibits in front of you.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that answer in that we have not established what was in the vial. The only thing that can be testified to at this junction is that it is a vial with a label marked methylprednisolone acetate.
Seriously? That's your objection?
I think that's where we are in the process, and hopefully we'll find out more. I'm going to overrule the objection.
Okay. Have this marked as 11, please.
Number 11, Your Honor.
Very well.
Done. Approach the witness, please.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Handy what's been marked for identification is States 11. Ask you to identify that.
If you happen to have a pair of scissors, this is still sealed.
This is the one with scissors. Okay. Don't run with those.
Thank you.
Can you identify that, sir?
This is a vial of dried material now that was labeled in the lab as item 2-1, but it states exhibit number 11 that I generated as a result of my analysis.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand any of that. What was that vial?
Thought you didn't want him to answer that.
I don't think we've gotten to that point yet.
No.
I'm going to
His
overrule the
identification,
objection.
I couldn't understand what he was classifying that as. I'm just asking him to repeat it a little slower if possible.
So this item was the liquid contents removed by me from state's exhibit number 10.
Thank you.
If I could have this marked as States 12, please.
Very well.
Of course I will. Maybe. Yeah, approach the witness, please.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
And what's been marked for identification is States 12. Ask you to take a look at that.
This is a bottle of that's labeled as enclomiphene citrate that I received in the lab.
Put it back in the bag if you want to. 13. Your Honor, if I could have State's Exhibit 13 marked here, please.
Okay.
This is number 13, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stevens, I hand you what's been marked for identification as State's 13 and ask you to take a look at that, please. Do you recognize that?
Yes, this is the liquid that I removed from State's Exhibit 12.
Okay. Oops. If I could have this 14, please.
This is number 14, Your Honor.
Very well.
Once again, if I could approach the witness, please, Your Honor.
Yes.
Hand you what's been marked for identification as State's 14. What's a little sticker? Oh, right there. Okay. And you have, I believe, with you number 15.
It's 14.
Right, but he's also got 50. Do you need a separate?
15 needs to be marked. Is that right, Mr. Truman?
It does, Your Honor. Thank you.
This is 15, Your Honor.
Very well.
And Your Honor, I'll hand this to the witness if that's acceptable.
Yes.
Thank you. Hand you what's been marked for identification as State's 50. Recognize that?
Yes, that's the liquid contents I removed from State's Exhibit 14.
Mr. Stevens, explain to us the procedure that when you received this, what did you do with these items?
The first thing I did is administrative. It's we call it a check-in,
Okay.
where I analyzed, where I visually inspect these and see what kind of things I received. So the first thing I noticed was the box, which is State's Exhibit 9. The next thing was the first vial that I came across, State's Exhibit 10. And the contents of that, which have been labeled as State's Exhibit 11. I got another vial, State's Exhibit 12. The contents of that vial, State's Exhibit 13. And a third vial, and its liquid contents. So I had 3 vials, and then of those 3 liquids that were generated. And I just took inventory of what I had, what the bottles were labeled as, what markings they might have had on them, what lot information they had. If they had a manufacturer, what was that manufacturer? So that visual examination was first.
I think I failed to ask you to identify 14.
State's Exhibit 14 is a vial that's labeled as Humalog Insulin List Pro. 10 milliliters, 100 units per milliliter.
In summary fashion, tell us what you did to perform your analysis.
So each of these items goes through a standard operating procedure or a technical procedure where we analyze them. We use scientific instruments to analyze them. We compare them to references where practical, and then we determine the results of those analyses.
Take a look at 10, please. What was your analysis of that?
So for States Exhibit 10, I determined that States Exhibit 10, the vial labeled methylprednisolone acetate, and the liquid that came out of it, States Exhibit 11, is the one I actually tested.
Explain that to us, please.
So States Exhibit 10 is the physical vial. States Exhibit 11 was the liquid recovered from that vial, the liquid that came out of this vial. So my analysis was on the liquid.
Okay. Now, the States 11, that was lab material. You have a inventory of bottles that you use for your analysis. Is that what that is?
We have libraries and reference materials that we use, yes.
Okay, but the actual container itself, I mean, did that come with the information that came to you, or was that just some kind of testing process that you used?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, as I understood what your testimony was, you analyzed the contents of number 10 by putting it into 11.
I didn't analyze the contents of 10, the vial. I transferred those contents to States Exhibit 11.
That's okay.
And then I analyzed States Exhibit 11. So,
We're on the same page now, I think. Go ahead and explain what you did.
so visual examination on 10, what were the labels and markings on the bottle, then chemical analysis on the liquid that was within this bottle.
And again, in summary fashion, what did you do to analyze States 11?
States Exhibit 11 was subjected to 3 different other kinds of testing. They're all scientific instrumentation. One of them is known as Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy. The next one, gas chromatography, mass spectrometry. And the final one, we call DART-TOF-MS, which stands for Direct Analysis in Real Time, Time of Flight, Mass Spectrometry. All of these are very expensive, complicated instruments. Their primary goal is to determine the chemical composition of the materials within a liquid or a solid.
What's the number of that one? What's the number of that one?
10, 11, 12.
Okay. Go ahead and talk about 12,
Yes.
please. What was number 12?
12 was a vial labeled enclomiphene citrate, 30 milliliters, and on that vial it says for research purposes only, not for human consumption. That was the vial. This vial generated States Exhibit 13, which is the liquid that came out of that vial.
And so you actually performed your examination on States 13, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And tell us again in summary fashion, what did you do with States 13?
States Exhibit 13 was subjected to the same analytical scheme as States Exhibit 11, Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, or FTIR, gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, GCMS, and DART-TOF-MS, direct analysis in real time, time of flight, mass spectrometry.
And this one's 14? And 14, what did you do with States 14 when you received it?
So visually examined it, determined that it was labeled Insulin, Lispro, and Humalog, and then separated the contents into a new vial, States Exhibit 15, the liquid, and analyzed the liquid.
And that's the analysis you conducted on States 15?
That is correct.
Was your analysis such that you could conclude what was contained in those bottles that you received?
Yes.
And what conclusions did you reach?
For the vial that was labeled methylprednisolone acetate and the liquid that was tested, States Exhibit 11, is my determination that that States Exhibit 11 was consistent with containing methylprednisolone acetate. In other words, the chemical that is on the vial, it was consistent with containing the chemical labeled on the vial.
And I forgot the number, but the next one you analyzed.
States Exhibit 12, the bottle labeled enclomiphene citrate, was my conclusion that the liquid that came out of that, States Exhibit 13, was consistent with containing glycerol and letrozole. I'll remind you that the bottle is labeled enclomiphene citrate, so it was not what was labeled on the bottle.
The stuff according to the label was not the stuff you found.
That is correct.
And last, the next exhibit.
This was States Exhibit 14, the vial labeled Humalog Insulin Lispro. Is my conclusion that is consistent with containing human insulin or Humalog.
From the information provided, you took a number of photographs of the items that you've been reviewing with the jury today, correct?
Yes.
Could I have that mark, please?
State exhibit number 16, Your Honor.
Okay.
Oops, excuse me. Ran out of arm. Steve, on States Exhibit 16 for identification, you took that photograph?
Yes, I did.
What are we looking at? Oh, thank you.
These are photographs that I took of the States Exhibit 9 as received in the laboratory.
And that's the box.
That is correct.
And what's that?
That is another picture of States Exhibit 9.
You also took that photograph?
I did.
And what is that depicting?
This is States Exhibit 10 as received, which at the time contained States Exhibit 11, the liquid.
The next photograph you took, what's the significance of the plastic cover?
This plastic cover is used as a tamper-evident control so that when the septum that would be expected to be underneath there, and in this case there's a septum, a rubber material that's in the center, couldn't be inadvertently punctured.
Had there been any tampering of the exhibit by the time that you received it?
When I visually inspected it and tried to remove that, the force that I was using, which I described as a moderate force, was insufficient to remove that, implying to me that it was probably intact.
And the next photograph.
These are pictures that I took of States Exhibit 12 with the liquid being inside States Exhibit 13.
And the next one.
These are pictures I took of States Exhibit 14 with the liquid being inside States Exhibit 15.
The last photograph.
These are close-ups of States Exhibit 14, the vial.
At the conclusion of your study of all of these exhibits, did you write a report of your findings?
I did.
If I could have this last exhibit, Mark, please.
State's exhibit number 17, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Let me give you that one, and I'll trade you that one. Thank you. And what's been marked for identification as state 17. You recognize that?
I do. This is the report I issued dated July 20th, 2021.
And could you share with us your conclusions that you embodied in that report, please?
So the conclusions that are embodied in this report are that States Exhibit 11, the liquid from the methylprednisolone labeled bottle, were consistent with containing methylprednisolone acetate, which is the chemical that was labeled on the bottle, States Exhibit 10. States Exhibit 12, the liquid that came out of there, States Exhibit 13, is consistent with containing letrozole and glycerol. Those are not the chemicals labeled on the bottle. The bottle is labeled as enclomiphene citrate. And States Exhibit 14, the bottle labeled Humalog Insulin Lispro. And the contents, States Exhibit 15. States Exhibit 15, the liquid, is consistent with containing human insulin / Humalog.
Stevens, what was your report that you have in front of you and you've just reviewed with us, was that the only report you wrote in this case?
It was.
Has anything been brought to your attention since you conducted your study and wrote your report that would cause you to change your mind?
No.
Your Honor, at this point, the state moves 9 through 17 into evidence.
Any objection, Mr. Selden?
No, Your Honor.
All right, States Exhibits 9 through 17 are admitted into evidence.
Stevens, focusing on the insulin, is there a way to determine the difference between insulin and insulin? I'm not sure how. Lispro, is that how it's pronounced?
There is human insulin, which is generated in the human body, and then there's human insulin. There's human insulin, and there's insulin Lispro. Lispro is what we call an isomer, the same chemical formula, manufactured in a lab, with a subtle difference, a change in order of the blocks that build it. So there is differences in the chemical structure, but our techniques will not tell them apart. So that's why the report says it's consistent with containing human insulin / Humalog. Humalog is the brand name for insulin Lispro.
What's the intention or what's the use of insulin that you found in your lab?
Insulin is used to regulate blood sugar.
Could I have just a moment, please?
Yes, you may.
You didn't make any opinion or suggest any conclusion as to the contents in terms of volume of any of those bottles, did you?
I did not.
Why not?
Our technical procedures don't have that as part of our routine analysis, and reporting measurements of significance, such as the volume of a vial, is not something our lab does.
That's all the questions the state has, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Let's take our mid-morning break at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll break for about 10 minutes. Enjoy the delicious donuts that we have placed in your jury room. Do not discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone else. You may go with the bailiff to your jury room now. proper for you to talk to the prosecutor or to defense counsel or anyone else about proposed testimony or cross-examination, you're welcome. Are there any matters that we need to take up out of the presence of the jury at this time, Mr. Truman?
Thank you.
Anything, Mr. Selden? Very well. Bring in the jury, please. We continue with cross-examination of the witness, please. Mr. Selden.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Stevens, my name is Stanley Selden. I'm co-counsel for the defense for Natalie Cochran. Good morning. I would like to ask you, you have testified in other trials before, have you not?
I have.
And in all of those trials, you testified for the prosecution or the state, isn't that correct?
I believe that is correct, yes.
And in this case, you are asked by the prosecution and the state to testify more or less on their behalf as to the substances submitted for your analysis. Isn't that correct?
I was asked to testify to the report I had previously issued. So yes, that happened to be for the state in this case.
Right. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your education and training, not so much to qualify you as an expert, which has already been done, but just general knowledge.
Sure.
Okay? Yeah. In the course of your education, did you have any courses in toxicology?
Yes, I did. I had one course in graduate school.
And toxicology is the study of toxins or poisons in the body. Would that be a fair summary?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have courses in biochemistry and organic chemistry?
Yes, in undergrad, I had courses in both.
And would you tell briefly what biochemistry is?
Biochemistry, as I learned it in undergrad, is the interaction of human biology with chemistry. So materials that go into and out of your body.
Right. So you have some knowledge of how chemicals introduced in the body react in the body. Would that be a fair statement?
No, that's actually outside the scope of my expertise at the FBI.
But you have some knowledge through research, especially in the case of Humalog, correct?
As part of the training, yes, I have some foundational understanding of what insulin is, but not how it interacts with the body.
Okay. were you aware or were you informed that the substances provided to you for analysis, especially the Humalog and the methylprednisolone, were recovered from the home of Natalie Cochran, which was 433 4H Lake Road?
Yes, that probably would have been on the incoming description of evidence provided.
Okay. And were you aware or were you told that those items were recovered pursuant to a search of 433 4H Lake Road by police officers and other investigating officers?
I don't recall, no, I don't recall being told that. I mean, obviously they were obtained and I was provided information from where they were obtained, but not how they were obtained.
Okay. But they were obtained by the state and then subsequently provided to you, correct?
I assume so, yes.
I submit to you that Michael Cochran died around February 11th of 2019. These substances were not provided to you until June of 2021. Isn't that correct?
They were recovered in the field office sooner than that, but they arrived in my unit in, I believe it was May of 2021.
Okay.
And I started the analysis in June of 2021.
So over 2 years subsequent to the death of Michael Cochran, wouldn't that be a fair statement?
When
If he
did you
passed away in February of 2019.
Correct.
I submit to you that these substances were collected approximately 4 months to 5 months after the death of Michael Cochran in February of 2019. Do you know what was done with these, where they were, how they were stored prior to you receiving them approximately 2 years later?
No, I do not.
Now, I would like to discuss States 10 and 11. And 10 was a vial marked methylprednisolone acetate. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And your report states, and it's also confirmed, that that particular item was found in a cabinet in the corner of the home of the
Your Honor.
Cochrans.
He's already indicated he doesn't know any of this stuff.
I think that's correct. The court will sustain the objection.
But this was recovered at 433 4H Lake Road.
Sustained,
Just-
please, Mr.
Thank you.
Selden.
Okay. Methylprednisolone acetate is a synthetic corticosteroid, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
A form of steroids in general, right?
The use that I researched and came across was an anti-inflammatory,
All right.
not a corticosteroid, an anabolic steroid for growing muscle tissue.
And that leads me to my next question, which is methylprednisolone acetate suppresses inflammation, right?
Correct.
Now, I submit to you that if Natalie Cochran had inflammation of the lungs, would it be a proper use of methylprednisolone acetate to aid in suppressing that inflammation of the lungs?
That is a question that would be answered by a doctor that's outside of my area of expertise.
Well, methylprednisolone acetate suppresses inflammation, right?
Objection. The witness has indicated it's beyond his area of expertise. It's beyond his area of expertise.
I think that says it all. The court is constrained to sustain the objection.
Okay. Can steroids increase blood sugar?
Again, that's not an area I'm an expert in. The interaction of steroids with the human body would be an endocrinologist or potentially a toxicologist or an MD, a doctor.
Okay. Do you know if an overdose of methylprednisolone acetate is life-threatening or not?
I do not know.
Okay. I'd like to move on to states 12 and 13. That was identified as a vial marked enclophamine citrate. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And that particular substance, according to your report, came from 211 Old Grandview Road, which was not the Cochran residence. Isn't it correct as to where it was recovered from?
Your Honor, may I refer to the report? States Exhibit
Certainly.
17. So that is not listed in the report. Oh, excuse me, yes it is. States Exhibit 12 was recovered from 211 Old Grandview.
Thank you. Which, of course, is not the same as 433 4H Lake Road, right?
Correct.
Now, your extensive analysis showed that it didn't contain enclophamine citrate. It contained glycerol and letrozole, correct?
Correct.
So it was mismarked, misidentified, right?
The label on States Exhibit 12 did not match the contents of the liquid States Exhibit 13. That's correct.
Fine. If I submit to you that withdraw that, I'm not going to ask that question. I'd like to move on to states 14 and 15. That was marked as Humalog Insulin Liz Pro. Is that correct?
Yes, States Exhibit, the vial, States Exhibit 14 was marked that.
And you testified that you have specialized knowledge, research, etc., into Humalog insulin and its effects and your research. Is that correct?
I believe I testified that I have the expertise to analyze those and determine whether or not something contains that or is consistent with containing those materials, not their effects on the human body.
Insulin, in general, well, there are different classifications of insulin. There's insulin produced by the pancreas of the body, which is produced internally by the body, correct?
Correct.
Then you have insulin, which is manufactured. You have Humalog Liz Pro, and you have a couple of other brands of insulin. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You have essentially two different kinds of synthetic insulin. You have fast-acting insulin, which Humalog Liz Pro is a member of, and you have the slower, longer-acting types of insulin, correct?
Correct.
Humalog Liz Pro insulin is termed fast-acting because its effects take approximately 15 minutes to work, correct?
My research said 15 to 30 minutes, but yes, it's fast acting in that it is ready, available insulin. Yes.
And its workings or effect is to essentially reduce blood sugar, right?
The marketed purpose of insulin is to regulate blood sugar. Its effects in the body on any given injection would be something best answered by an endocrinologist or a doctor.
But you said you have specialized knowledge of insulin, right?
Correct? Yes.
Okay. Now, insulin, from your understanding of it, doesn't just wham, it takes effect and that's it. Humalog Lispro insulin works over 3 to 4 hours. Isn't that right?
Again, that's a question best answered by an endocrinologist or doctor. My expertise is in the analysis of the chemistry of insulin, not its interactions in the human body.
But there were various research articles attached to the reports, which included research into insulin, its effects, etc. Weren't you familiar with those?
Yes, there are references attached to my report that talk generically. I don't believe there were actual studies. There are lists, there are references to some studies, but those are not studies that I understood as interacting in a human body.
Well, why did you research them then?
There are references.
Why did you refer to them, and why did you say you were familiar with them?
If I'm understanding correctly, there's two sources of information that came out of the references that I provided. One was drugs.com, which is a site that we use for generic uses of drugs. And the other one was the Merck Index. And the Merck Index was provided for some of these to show generically what these are used for. And those references may be included in those studies in this pronounced.
And the Merck Index and those studies tell you how they work in the body, right? How their chemicals work, right?
The references that are included may provide that information, but those are not studies that they're within my scope of expertise.
Permission to mark this exhibit for identification purposes?
All right, if you'll hand it to the clerk, please.
This will be Defendant's Exhibit number 9.
Permission to approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Permission to question the witness from here, Your
You
Honor?
may proceed.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Stevens, would you look at those collection of photographs?
Sure.
How many photographs are there?
There are 4 photographs of what appear to be a vial in different positions.
Okay. I'm going to go through them one by one, if that's all right. The top one, would it be a fair representation to say this is a photograph of Humalog Insulin Lispro vial? It's marked U100. At the bottom it says Lilly, and it has a fairly clear liquid that appears to be full to the top. Would that be correct?
This is a picture of a Humalog insulin bottle, Insulin Lispro, marked Lilly. It's hard to tell from the image. That's the collar of the vial, so it does look like there's a liquid there, but it could be a bubble as well. This material's in a bubble. So without having seen this, I don't know. I didn't take this picture.
Well, I would submit to you that this photograph was taken by Lieutenant Bledsoe and another officer at the location of 433 4H Lake Road, and it was placed on a counter and photographed. Okay? Does this look like the same vial that was submitted to you for analysis?
The front of this has the same markings. I would want to check with States Exhibit 14 to make sure they have the same serials. And it's not possible to tell different lots. If they're the same lot of vials, it wouldn't be possible to determine if this vial and this vial were actually the same
Okay.
from pictures alone.
The second photograph is a side view of what appears to be the same vial. Isn't that correct?
Yes, this is a picture of another vial, or the same vial, if that's what you're telling me.
And again, as far as what it shows, is it appears to be filled to the top, or, as you said, possibly a bubble, correct?
From the picture alone, I can't determine where the liquid is. There's a label that covers the vast majority of the bottle, and then at the very top, around where the collar of the vial is, there's a circle, and that could be liquid or it could be a bubble.
Okay. You know, and I'd like to put these on the viewer so the jury can see as well.
Go ahead.
Now, Mr. Stevens, if you look at this viewer, and I don't know if you can see it or not,
Okay.
this is the first photograph I showed you, which was identified as Humalog Insulin Viz Pro. Is that right?
Correct.
And as you can see from this photograph, it appears as if the fluid comes all the way up to here on the bottom. Would that not be a fair and accurate representation?
Your Honor, the state objects. This is way outside of this witness's expertise. The picture is what the picture is, but it has nothing to do with forensic chemistry.
Your Honor, it does in the sense that we are documenting what he received, what condition it was in, and how it was analyzed.
I'm not sure the witness can answer, but I'll give the defense some latitude. If you can answer, Mr. Stevens, go ahead.
So as I previously testified to, it does look like there is some material up there at the top, much like you see now with States Exhibit 15. There are bubbles, and so from this picture alone, I can't ascertain whether that's liquid or a bubble, or just the color of the vial. So I can't answer the question accurately from this picture alone.
This second photograph is, or appears to be, the same vial from the side view. Would that be fair?
No, I refer to States Exhibit 14. to
Sure.
Check some of the markings. Yes, this has the same markings as States Exhibit 14.
Right, it has the numbers on the side, which are identical to the state's exhibit.
Correct.
Would you look at this photograph? Does this appear to be the same vial with the same contents viewed from the other side? And I call attention to these markings on the side, WG4171AMX. Is that the same vial as the state's?
this picture has the same markings as the vial from the state. I don't know if it's the same vial. Same markings.
Appears to be the same.
It has the same markings.
Yeah. I submit to you that, as I said, this vial was recovered and photographed by Lieutenant Bledsoe, who also stated in his report when he submitted these vials for analysis that this particular vial appeared to be full and unopened. Can you comment on that?
This is the first time I've heard that information. So I have no opinion, and it doesn't change my conclusion that item 15 is consistent with containing insulin, human insulin / Lispro.
And just for clarification, this last photograph, which was in this batch, again was photographed by Lieutenant Bledsoe as he found it allegedly in Natalie Cochran's refrigerator at 433 4H Lake Road. Does that information give you any other information or impact your analysis?
No, it does not.
Okay, thank you. Move for admission, Your Honor.
Any objection, Mr. Truman?
None.
Very well. What exhibits again are presented, Madam Clerk?
These 4 photos, number 9.
Collectively marked as number 9, they will be admitted.
Now, I know you're not an endocrinologist, but in order for synthetic insulin to be used, it has to either be injected directly with a hypodermic needle, or it has to be put into a pump worn by an individual for its use in the body. Isn't that correct?
I'm not familiar with the methods of application, if you will, the routes of entry that the drug would, but those sound like things that I've heard in general media. In other words, I don't know how the drug is best administered into the body.
In the reports provided, Humalog Lispro, once the top is punctured, has to be used within 28 days or its potency disappears. As a chemist, isn't that correct?
No, that can't be correct. In our case, we use standards for a period of time. So when we puncture them and we use them, we can still use them up until they no longer meet our quality criteria. From a medical perspective, that may be the case. But from an analytical chemistry, can we detect this? The answer is we can detect after something has been punctured more than 28 days.
You can't determine the potency of the drug as far as a time period. You didn't do any tests for the potency of the drug.
Correct. We do not test for concentration or potency as part of our routine analysis. So no, we did not test the potency of the drug.
But there were reports attached to your report and other reports from the FBI that once the top of Humalog insulin vial is punctured, the contents degrade over a period of time as far as usefulness in the body. Isn't that correct?
When I tested the sample that was submitted, States Exhibit 15, I compared it to fresh insulin obtained from a pharmacy, and they compared favorably. In other words, the ratios that we look at and the retention times that we look at were all consistent, and hence the conclusion. States Exhibit 15 is consistent with containing human insulin / Humalog at the time I analyzed it.
Okay. Now that brings up another point. To analyze the contents of this vial, marked Humalog, and give me just a moment. You or someone in your lab went out and got a new bottle of Humalog from Dan's Wellness Pharmacy for comparison, correct?
Correct.
And you did various tests on that bottle and compared it to the bottle that was submitted to you, all kinds of tests, and you found it was consistent with Humalog Lispro insulin, correct?
The report wording is consistent with consistent with human insulin / Humalog. Yes.
Consistent with means it is not identical, but it is of the same family. It appears to be the same type of drug, right?
Consistent with is the predefined highest level of association that we have in that standard operating procedure. So there is no identification of insulin in our lab. It's not a possibility.
Now, synthetic insulin is produced by the companies in batches. What I mean is the sum total of all synthetic insulin isn't produced by the manufacturer at the same time. It's done in batches of insulin. Isn't that correct?
Yes, insulin would be manufactured in lots or batches, yes.
Now, it has been put forth or alleged that a vial of Humalog Lispro insulin was provided to Natalie Cochran on or about February 6th of 2019. There is no possible way to say that particular vial is the particular vial that was analyzed by you. Isn't that correct?
I want to make sure I understand your question. You're asking, is the item submitted to me the vial that was collected, or are you asking if I can tie the vial that I tested to the one you described?
I'll ask it a little clearer. and I want to make sure I don't misstate anything. There have been some suggestions, implications that a vial of Humalog Lispro insulin might have been used by Natalie Cochran to inject her husband, and that vial may have been provided by the Davises, who had a son with diabetes. You don't have any way of determining if that was true, that vial was the vial you were provided in 21, which was recovered 4 or 5 months after the death of Michael Cochran. Wouldn't that
My
be true?
analysis would not link insulin to any incident. It only tests the contents of the vial. In other words, I don't know that any alleged activities happened out of this vial.
Okay. Why didn't you measure the volume of the vial?
At the time it was submitted, it was not in question, and that's not part of our technical operating procedure. That's not a requirement. That's not something that we were asked to do at the time, and it's not something that we actually have a procedure to do.
Why not? Wouldn't that be the first thing you would want to know to determine if any of the fluid was taken out?
Your Honor, this is beyond the witness's scope. He says this is our procedure. He followed the procedure. The defense hypothetical as to why is irrelevant.
I think we're getting far afield. The court is going to sustain the objection.
You don't know if any fluid was taken out of this vial or not.
That is correct.
Now it's been set forth that there was a puncture in the top of this vial. Is that correct?
That's outside my scope of expertise. There's a different examiner that examined that.
But you examined the bottle when it came in, did you not?
I did visually examine the bottle, but it's outside my area of expertise to determine if any markings on there are a result of a tool, like a needle or a syringe.
I didn't ask you about markings. I actually asked you about it has like a rubber top. In order to use it, someone has to use a needle to put it in to withdraw the substance. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the primary way that a user at home would use insulin.
And if there was a puncture in the top of that rubber seal, did you observe that when you looked at the bottle? I'm not talking about markings. I'm talking about a puncture in the top.
I captured images, States Exhibit 16, that include an image of the top of that, but I do not have an opinion on whether or not that's a puncture.
Okay. There were no fingerprints on the bottle. Is that correct?
It's outside my area of expertise.
Well, who examines the bottle when it comes in to determine if they're fingerprints or not?
In this case, I believe it went to our latent prints operating unit, which they would be the ones that would issue reports on that.
Okay. Did you review any of those reports or look at any of them?
I do not.
Now, I know it's not your area of expertise, but if the top was punctured, there would be no way to determine when that occurred.
Objection.
Sustained.
Okay. A moment, Your Honor. I'd like to look over my notes.
All right.
If the contents of the vial submitted to you and were tested and they were the same or consistent with a brand new bottle of Humalog insulin, which you did, you compared it. How could if the bottle were punctured 2 years earlier, how would the contents compare? Would not the contents of the vial you were given be different as far as degrading?
We didn't conduct concentration studies. We didn't conduct potency studies. These are, again, outside the scope of our technical expertise. Our technical procedures, sorry.
Last time, Your Honor.
All right.
I believe that concludes my cross-examination, Your Honor.
Very well. Redirect Mr. Truman.
State has no additional questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Any reason to hold this gentleman further?
None.
Anything further from Mr. Stevens? Mr. Selden?
I don't believe so. I believe he can be excused.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. You may step down. You are excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Come up, please. All right, members of the jury, you may be delighted or you may be sad, but we've gone as far as we can go today. Today is Friday, so you'll have a very nice weekend. If you come to court on Tuesday, you'll be surprised because Tuesday is a holiday. It's Martin Luther King Day, and we will be closed. So we have a 3-day weekend. I don't like holidays during a trial because it gives my juries an extra day to get into trouble. And I don't want you all to get into trouble. We've already got too much time and effort invested in this matter to have difficulties. You will hear, if you're not careful, people talking about this case. There's much to do online. As I've explained to you, we have a media source that is streaming this live, and not only do they do that, they rebroadcast it in the evenings. You all see it firsthand. There's no need for you to see a rebroadcast when you get home, because you have the best seats in the house. Please do not watch any of the broadcasts or hear any of the commentaries that people offer. You folks are in the catbird's seats. You folks will be asked to decide this case, and I don't want you to be influenced one way or another by someone else's opinion. It is your decision that will count. So guard against reports popping up on TV at news time. Please do not read the newspaper. Please do not try to conduct any research online, and please guard against reading any reports or viewing any video online. I want you to keep an open mind, as I have said. We will start up again on Tuesday morning, promptly at 9 o'clock, and we will have a whole slate of witnesses for you at that time. We've simply had a little bit of scheduling difficulty today, and that is the reason why we are quitting early today. But we will be ready for you folks Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. Again, do not talk among yourselves or with anyone else about this case. Have a wonderful weekend, and put this out of your mind over the weekend, and be with your families and your friends, and rest up so that Tuesday you can come back refreshed and be ready to delve back into this trial. All right, with that admonition, you may follow the bailiff to your jury room, and I'll see you Tuesday morning. All right, are there any matters that we need to discuss on the record out of the presence of the jury at this time?
That's from the state, Your Honor. Thank you.
Your Honor, I have a moment to speak to Mr.
Yes.
We have a slight problem with one of our experts, Dr. Banerjee. We were attempting to have her come in Monday to be present for testimony, Tuesday and Wednesday, when we expect the state's expert to testify so she could advise us, but there are many complications with that. She would like to attend by a video-audio hookup or an audio hookup so she can listen to their testimony. We don't want to distract from the state's experts. We were wondering if perhaps she could be hooked up by our equipment, and if her picture wasn't there, at least she could listen to the testimony.
Well, this is what comes to mind. I suppose she could always watch it as it's being broadcast live on court TV. If she has access to that, she could see it like everybody else is watching it. Otherwise, she could listen by telephone. We could call her and arrange our speaker so that she could hear the testimony over the phone.
And that would be preferable, Your Honor, because the purpose is so she can advise us, for example, on cross-examination, et cetera. So a phone hookup or an audio hookup would be preferable.
Okay. Any difficulties with the state with that solution, Mr. Truman?
None, Your Honor. Thank you.
Very well. What other problems do we need to talk about?
Your Honor, we would just like to renew our motion to exclude the vial of insulin and the motions connected with that, just for the record.
All right. The court will continue to deny all of those motions. I'll preserve the defense exception to the court's previous rulings and the present ruling, and it will be preserved for possible review at an appropriate time. All right. Thank you all. Court is in recess.